I am Lord Guillermo de Cervantes. I come from España, but my home is in Trimaris in the Shire of South Keep. I've been doing pyrography now for 4 years. Yes?
No,
Okay. If anybody has a question during my presentation of pyrography for beginners, please text it and the prompter will let me know of your question. So we want to be able to answer any questions as we proceed. I started in pyrography I started as an artist, as a child, drawing, and I always used pencils and markers. I actually had a fear of paint for most of my life, which sounds absurd. But once I went into the SCA and I started doing scroll work, I got over that very quickly. And then I began to challenge myself. I said, if I can use my drawing skills with painting, what else can I use it on? And I started doing leatherworking. And from leatherworking, I said, well, what else can I use it on? And then I found pyrography. Pyrography is a general name for burning an object to create art. It's a general name because you can use pyrography on bone, you can use it on leather, you can use it on wood, obviously. Wood burning would be the immediate recognition, but it can be done on any surface that your imagination would allow. So that's why we use the general term. It is an art form that has been around for centuries. And so I'm going to share some pictures with you. I'm afraid the pictures aren't very organized, but I'm going to flip the camera around. And let's open it up. Oh, that's not it. One moment, please. So there was some discussion of whether or not I'd be able to train in this workshop because of the tie-in with Spain. One of the actual facilitators found, after hearing my previous class, found an example of pyrography from Spain. And pyrography is used frequently with furniture. So I need to know if this image is coming in clearly. Can you tell me, prompter, if you can see the picture well?
I can see it okay. I can make you host and then you can share your screen if you would like to do it that way.
Well, this will only be a moment.
Okay.
I'm just going to flash through a few pictures. So this is a picture from the 14th century of a Spanish chest. And this is what's allowing me to present in this workshop because it's from Spain. Now, when you do research, they talk about the use of needles in history, and this particular chest is a really good example of that because it's got some very fine work of heated needles to burn the wood. Now, this is another chest that's my inspiration for a current project that I'm working on. This is from the 13th century Italy. It's a classic wedding chest, and you'll see there's pyrography and some woodworking. This is a close-up of the Spanish chest, and you can see very well the detail work that is clearly done by a very fine tool or a needle. This is a close-up of a harp from Ireland. Harps were frequently decorated with pyrography as well. And you can see the actual burning of the wood along the harp. It's very nice. This is another close-up of the Spanish chest. All of this very fine detail work is really miraculous. It's inspired me to go on a whole other level of my work, which will come hopefully in the next few years. This brings us back to the harp. You can see it's almost like knotwork, the way they've done this. It's very beautiful. So this is the inspiration for my current project, Arts and Sciences project. This takes us back to the Italian chest. This is the inside lid of the chest. And I searched for a year to find some inspiration for my arts and sciences project, and this is it. These are Italian knights, basically camping outside of the city of Jerusalem. And so you see a very complex, detailed work between the shading and the costuming, basically. It's a very, very, very wonderful piece. And I'll show you what I'm working on later. This is the big chest open. And this is the harp. The harps were done in Ireland, and they're wonderful examples of pyrography. You notice that paint is minimal. Most of the decoration is pyrography. The paint is to accent the pyrography. And this is a wonderful example. It's the earliest example that I have of a gourd. Let me get closer. This gourd is from Peru, from 100 BC. And this is the earliest example I have. However, I've been told that Rome had done pyrography in the same time. I'm looking for an example of a Roman sword that were given to gladiators when they had earned their retirement from the arena. They were given a wooden sword to commemorate that. And I'm searching for some example in a museum somewhere of that, but I have not found it.
What are the dates of most of these? That's one of the questions.
This was 100 BC. And this is taking us back to Spain. I believe this is 1400, if my memory serves. The Italian chest was 1300s. So this is my first, if we refer back to the Italian chest, this is my first effort to do pyrography with that chest. This is using modern tools, which I'll show you soon. I wanted to get in the practice of using the design and trying to recreate it in a mundane way, just to get familiar with the movement and to really dissect the imagery. And so this was a table that was given in an SCA Heavy Weapons Championship tournament. And the winner of the tournament got this table. So that was its background. And let's see, that's enough of that. One second. Okay. All right, so that's the little history lesson. A few things you need to know about pyrography before you even consider doing it. One thing you need to think about is your health. This is not an art form for people with breathing or respiratory problems, because if you're doing period work, you're using fire and smoke. And if you do have those kinds of problems, you'll have to take precautions. This is not for anybody that is a germaphobe. It is a very dirty hobby. And I mean that in all the cleanest ways. You're dealing with smoke, you're dealing with ash, you're dealing with soot. And it is something that you have to be ready for. Question?
Just a comment. It says, does not play well with COVID-19.
Well, actually, that takes us to the safety precautions. People will use goggles, people will use masks, people will use respirators if necessary. So I would say it does, because we all have to use masks nowadays. I dived into my arts and sciences project because of the COVID-19 quarantine. I had to have something long and hard to do. And it kind of, this project that I'm currently working on, as I'll show you, is going to take me several months, maybe 6 months to finish. So it was perfect for quarantine. Other safety precautions, I use heat-resistant gloves. You might want to have a fire extinguisher and or a bucket of water on hand. I would strongly suggest a bucket of water on hand, because you're dealing with hot metal iron pokers, and you might need to cool them quickly, or put out a fire. I use a tray underneath my heat source to protect the table. Clothing you should wear, clothing you really don't give a damn about because fire will spark and you don't want it, and you will get dirty. And so you want to wear a shirt that you don't care about. Jeans are pretty good for the legs. Definitely do not use open-toed shoes. Because of the sparks, it hurts. I know. So sneakers would be fine, or any closed toe shoe would be fine. Let's see. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers that. In preparation for your work, eat well, eat a good meal before you start working. Because once you get working, it's going to be a system and a bit of an obsessive work. It's going to take, you might drop 6 hours and not even realize it, and you'll have to pull yourself away because of the kind of process that you use. And so you want to eat a good meal. Yes.
Okay, are there modern wood burning tools an adequate substitute for beginners, which I'm assuming you're probably going to get to?
Yes, I will get to that.
And
some other definitely get to that. And the answer is yes.
Okay, and then natural fibers, just like camping, is the other comment.
Mm-hmm. So the eat a good meal. If you have loved ones, kiss them goodbye, because you're going to be going into isolated mode. Make sure you have hydration on hand. Because you're not going to want to pull away. And if you have a loved one in your life and they really, really love you, maybe after a few hours, they'll bring you a sandwich, because you're going to be so involved in what you're doing that you won't even be thinking about food, and you'll need to eat. And so these are just some preliminary things that you want to think about and take care of before you begin to work. And make sure you have a working lighter. I use one of these lighters in my, I usually, and buy them in twos, because you'll have one and you'll run out and then you'll need another one. It's very frustrating when you do everything I just described to start working, and then you settle down to start working, and then your lighter doesn't work. And that's very frustrating. So make sure your lighter is functioning. Okay, so you asked about modern tools. This is it looks a little bit like a soldering iron. I chose this shirt for a reason. And the reason I like this modern tool very much is that it has a dial to control the heat. But I haven't really seen a lot of these. Usually you just buy it, plug it in, and go to town. But if you can find one with a dial, that's very handy. Because how much heat you use is relevant to the kinds of lines and drawing you do. Now, the thing that's wonderful about a modern tool like this is that you can take off the tips and replace them with other tips. And so I'm going to take you on a journey. And you see all these tips? These are all for the modern tool. And so you can replace them for any kind of imagery you want. A nice big circle. Most of your work, however, will be using a tip like this, which is a straight line tip, or it'll be a tip like this with a triangle, which is used for shading. I'm hoping this is coming in clear for you. But you will want to have a pair of pliers on hand, because you might want to change your tip and you don't want to waste time. Time is your enemy, I guess, when you're doing pyrography. You got to be very aware of time. And if you want to, you don't want to power down this tool to stop your work. And so just having a pair of pliers on hand to change the tips, it's handy. And make sure when you put the tip down, it's someplace safe, like in a bowl or something. because it's going to be hot. And then you can change your tip, and then you can get back to work. So, so this is what I used for that table, because it was my first time diving into that particular imagery, and I just wanted to, I didn't want to be bothered with the complications that I'm about to share with you with period work.
Any technical reason why you don't want to power down, or is it just because you get obsessed?
No, it's about time. You don't want to stop your work. You know, it's not, you know, it's annoying when you have to stop your work when you're in the middle of it, you know, and so it's just the process, just to keep the process going. Art is a flowing, fluid thing, and you don't want to interrupt that if you're in the process. It's like being in the zone. Why would you want to get out of the zone when you're there, you know, until you're ready? See, preparation, hydration. Okay, so now to the period work. So we don't use electricity. We use fire. But fire is not our goal. To do pyrography, the goal is heat. And it unfortunately takes a long time to get us to that place where we can actually do the work. It can take us about an hour of TLC, loving the fire, preparing the fire until it is actually ready to do the work. And so I use this cauldron. I bought this at I'm in Miami, and so there's a large population of Hispanic people in Miami. We have these little places called botanicas, which are like spiritual shopping centers. And I bought this in a botanica. They thought it was very strange coming in and buying one, but it served my purpose well. You don't have to use a cauldron. It could be anything that can contain heat and allow you to do the work. So I fill this cauldron with lots of different sources of fuel. Another journey. We're taking on a journey. I feel like Mr. Rogers. Okay, so I do this in layers. You have different kind of fuel sources here. The standard quick lighting coal would be one layer. This is oak. I buy these at the common grocery stores. This is oak is very strong and slow burning, and it's wonderful, but it takes, like as I said, it takes a little while for it to actually take to the fire. This is wood charcoal. It's actually wood, but it's been burned a little bit already. And these little chips are like kindling, you know, and just keeping them in the fire, especially in the beginning. And so in the cauldron, I'm doing layers of this. I have maybe 2 or 3 chunks of this in the middle of the oak, but I'll have a layer of coal, a layer of chips, and maybe a layer of the wood coal, and I have that all set up in the cauldron before I start. And then I have to use this kind of fuel, the liquid fuel, to keep the fire lit for a while until it actually takes. And that is the dance that you start. Before you actually begin doing pyrography, you have to get the fire ready. And
sorry, the question that was the cauldron made of clay?
No, it's iron. It's iron. I don't think yet. Well, I know there is clay ovens, but I would stick to a metal kind of container personally, especially the way we're working with the tools. And so let me show you a little bit about the tools. Remember the straight edge little piece? Well, this is back to the white shirt. So this is my iron poker. If you see how straight the edge is. We use this for a straight line by laying it flat on the wood and dragging it across. If you need to do curves, you might use the tip, the very tip of it, and with the movement of your elbow, not your wrist, but your elbow, you would be able to do curves and circles. And so this is your main tool that you're going to use. Notice the length. The length is very important. I made a very grave mistake once in ordering tools, which I'll show you in a moment. It's about a foot in length, and then you add the handle. See how that works? That's nice, isn't it? That way you can. It's got some scorching on it, but it's out of the fire because the fire is going to be here, or in the heat. So the length is very important. I made a mistake. I wanted to order. By the way I got these is in the very classic sense. I contacted a blacksmith at Gulf War here in America, and had a contract for him to make 3 of these, and 3 of all the other tools that I'm going to show you. That was very valuable because you want to have 3 tools in your fire at one time. Why? These suckers only stay hot for 7 seconds. And that is not very long. And so by having 3 of them in the fire at one time, you're able to continually work and maintain the art. While you're working one, the other 2 are getting hot or staying hot. So I ordered a set of 3 of each one. Let me show you the other kinds.
While you're setting up the 2 questions, do you put the cauldron on a special surface?
Yes, I have a metal tray underneath the cauldron to protect the table.
Okay, and then are there any vents near the bottom of the cauldron so air can get to the fuel?
No. That's what this is for. I'll tell you a story about this in a minute. So this is a bellows, and about 6 months before I was able to do pyrography, I had to create a bellows because Amazon wasn't a big deal then, and I had to make a bellows. That was one of my very first Arts and Sciences projects, was to create this bellows. But anyway, I'll get back to that. So the other tools, remember the triangular tool I showed you? This is the same tool, except it's bigger. And this is what we would use for shading to give a texture to the work. And so when you heat it, you're laying the tool flat on the wood and basically dragging it to give shading and value. This is a nice, sharp, pointy thingy, which is good for little dots. I don't use this one as much. And here's a not so sharp, pointy thingy. It's got a rounded tip. And so if you want more circular burns for maybe diagrams or patterns, that's useful. I don't really use these 2 sharp pointy thingies and not sharp pointy thingies very often, but I have them. But I have 3 of each of them when I do. So that's an important thing. Now I told you about my mistake, and this is my mistake. I wanted to have smaller irons to work with more finer detail. And so I went back to the very same blacksmith, and he made these for me. And I think you could see the problem. They were so small, they were a danger. And I haven't gotten around to it, but I do now know personally several blacksmiths. And I still have the intention of having them weld on an extension to this so that I can still use these tools. This particular one is a square. But this was a learning. I'm trying to share with you some of my mistakes so you don't make them as well. So make sure the length is appropriate. You can see the difference here in length. You don't want to get burned. So there's that. Now, when I started out, I mentioned that I've been drawing since I was 10 years old. Drawing is certainly a benefit. Being able to draw is a benefit. However, it's not required. There are several ways that you can get carbon paper or copy paper. There are several ways that you can take an image, put it on your wood surface, and use these different types of tracing papers to get an image onto your source material, wood or whatever. And so I wouldn't be too discouraged if you are not necessarily a great drawer. There are other ways around that. But if you want to improve in your drawing skills, certainly I would encourage you to do as I did with that wood. Practice drawing whatever your inspiration is, that image that you're working from. Practice drawing it, and also being mindful of the shading values. When you're doing drawing and you want to learn how to shade, there's a secret. And I'm going to tell you that secret. Lighting. You want to identify where the light source is coming from. For you to do value, for you to do shading, you want to identify where the light source is coming from. So if you look at me, the light source is coming from here, on this side of my face, which means on the object, this is where you're going to use the tool to do the shading. So that's the first question when you're drawing and you want to do shading, is where is the light source coming from? And you may not know, you might have to decide that for yourself. If you decide that the light source is coming from this side, this is the side that you're going to do the shading value. And the more shading, the less light source. This isn't a very powerful light, so you have a lot of shadow on this side. It's almost a half shade. But if I got it closer, I don't know if I can now, you see the shading kind of fades away, and so you're just going to do a touch-up. So these are just some drawing tips, but I encourage you to practice drawing the source object before you start pyrography. You want to feel comfortable with the imagery before you actually starting the burn, because it's an investment once you get there. Okay, so the purpose of the bellows, this ugly thing is remember I was telling you how it's not a art form for people that are germaphobes. This is a really good indication of how dirty it can get. But when I started researching about how to make a bellows, I was looking for some kind of wood source. And this is relevant for this particular college, because there's a Spanish connection. I was walking through our grocery store, and I found these wonderful things called tostona presses. And a tostona press is this. This is a tostona press, except there is a hinge and there's a flap of wood. And you use that flap of wood to press plantains or bananas. And you squish them, and then you put them in oil and you cook them. Well, I didn't give a damn about that. I just thought they were the perfect size for my bellows. So I bought 2 of them, and my research told me I had to have a little hole here for the air to get in, and a little flap of leather inside that hole to catch the air, so that when I opened it, the air would go in, and I closed it, the air would not go out that hole. It'll go out this little copper tube. And this is leather that I stole from an abandoned couch. And this is carpet nails. And it looked much prettier when I started, but after years of use, it's taken the beating. And actually about 3 months ago, I had to face facts and retire my beauty, my pride, and my joy, because it just wasn't blowing the air the way I needed it. And then I discovered on Amazon I can order a brand new bellows. And when it came the very next day, I cannot tell you how happy I was. And it was beautiful because look at the size of that hole, and you can actually see the leather inside the hole that captures the air. Ain't it a pretty sight? And it gives a mighty blow. You would enjoy it if you could feel it. Okay, so we've talked about the tools. Let's talk about the work. The first step is to find a good source of wood. This is a project that I'm doing for our next crown list. We have a tradition of giving a gift to the consort, other consorts in the crown lists. And I decided that I'm going to give spoons with a bit of pyrography of a rose on the back of it. Now, what's relevant about this particular source wood is that you don't want to pick wood that has any knots on it. You want to try to pick wood that is untreated, so that it'll take to the burn better. Treated wood is a bit harder. You can still burn it, and as you'll see, I bought these again at my local grocery store. And unfortunately, all of these were treated. This is less treated than some of the other ones that I found, but it's just something, if you can control for it, you try to buy something that's untreated. Yeah.
What type of grain do you want to see in your wood? And treated wood also gives off fumes, is the two yes. points.
Okay, so I don't really think so much about the grain. I just think about the quality of see, this is like perfectly white. You know, when you're buying your source, you don't want a wood to have knots in it, you know, or too much color, or you know, you want to make sure that it's a good flat surface and that there's nothing in there that could distract from the image. Unless, of course, you're inspired to use that knot in your artwork. You know, some knots look like eyes, and you might be able to work that into your project. But you want to make sure that it is a good, clean, as white, not white, but a good, clean surface without any blemishes of any kind. Now, to the issue of fumes. When I first started doing pyrography, I was doing it outside in my apartment building by the pool. And I only had a few hours a day, and so I was a victim to two things. Time, the sun goes down, and I didn't have light. And so I had to work with lanterns all of a sudden. And the other thing I was a victim to was the elements. And that was a problem. But I wanted to be outside because of the fumes. Smoke. Fumes is one thing, but I mean, you got billowing smoke coming from your fire. And so I needed to have open ventilation. And if you have good ventilation, that really takes care of any fumes or smoke problems. But I had the problem with the sun going down, and if it rained, it would affect me. And so then I went under our apartment's carport, and the landlord said, no, 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 you're dealing with fire. You can't be underneath the carport. And she gave me the best gift she could give me. She allowed me to work on my porch. And that was so wonderful, because on my porch, I have the ventilation, I have cover, so I can actually work in the rain, and I'm close enough to my house, I can just bring out a light, so I don't have to be worried about the issue of the sun. Yeah.
Going back to your wood, can you use bamboo?
Yes, actually, this is bamboo.
Okay.
This is bamboo.
And you have about 5 to 6 minutes.
Okay. This is an example of the next stage of pyrography, which is doing the drawing on the wood. And then you're going to do a line with your pyrography. You're actually going to do the line drawing with the burning of the image of the rose. Let me bring this a little closer. So that is just a line drawing of the burn. Okay, and then the next step is to put the shading to give value to the work. And as you do the shading, it really makes it pop. So once you get to that, that's done. The final step is to actually use very fine sandpaper to clean it up. And then the last step is to cover it in a coat of polyurethane to treat it and protect it. And the way you do that, the first 3 coats, the first coat will be with the grain, the second coat will be against the grain, and the third coat will be with the grain again. And then that project's done.
How do you get a smooth gradation of shading?
Pressure. How much pressure you put on your work. You want to be mindful, especially, remember, in that 7 seconds of working with the tools, when you first put it down, it's gonna cut deeply. And so you're gonna want to be mindful of how deep you want that particular part of it to be. You might need to wait a moment for it to cool if you want a lighter burn. Some things like the edge of a face, you might want a light burn, whereas other lines, like for the tents that I'm going to do, might need a deeper edge. But how do you control for it is how much pressure you put onto the wood and how long you put it. And as you lessen the pressure, that's how you can control for the gradation of the shading.
Okay, and what gauge of sandpaper? I'm assuming green.
I'm sorry, I'm not a big expert on that. I would always just choose a lighter grain, because you don't want to destroy your work. You don't want to, you put so much effort into it. You want to just a light cleanup. So the lighter, I'm sorry, I don't really know the grains that well.
Okay, and what would a period treatment be for finishing? Linseed oil, wax, varnish, and then so the coated spoons are for decoration only. Those
Yeah.
2 questions.
No, once you have the polyurethane on it, they can work with it. They can cook with it. It's a special urethane that they can use when they cook. Some of these are treated with polyurethane when I get them, but very lightly treated. I'm going to be putting a thicker coat on it, but they can use them for cooking because it's a special kind for that purpose.
Okay, and then the period treatment?
I'm going to give you my email address. I have that information. I'm sorry I don't have it with me. And if you have your pen handy or pencil handy, my email address is fyeo2000@gmail.com. That's fyeo2000@gmail.com. Thank you.
Okay.
And on Facebook, my name is Richard Sullivan. And I'm going to just show you the work that I'm doing before we finish. Remember, these are the Italian knights. And so this is the chest that I'm working on with the Italian knights outside of Jerusalem. And what I've decided to do is wrap the image around the chest. So this is the front of the chest with the first knight, middle knight, the sides of the chest, and the knights on the back. I decided to combine them so they're sitting back to back. And so this is my current work that I'm slaving over. And the first step, again, is to do the drawing, as you can see here. The second step is to do the lines, and then you add detail, and then you do the shading. And so these are all the steps. Are we out of time?
We're out of time, and we gave you one last question. Would it work for just to scrub it with a rough cloth instead of sandpaper when working on wood item that has been plain finish isn't instead of sanded in the first place?
It can. You have to just trial and error. Is your friend, maybe soap and water might be enough for you. But I would start with soap and water and just try to clean it off. And then you might have some spots that you might need to work maybe with the sand. But thank you so much for coming and joining us.